Welcome back to Watch Your Assets, where we've got your money on our mind. I'm your host, Stephanie Bracken, and joining me today is a very special guest. She is our Director of Financial Planning at YTS. It's me. So you just have me today, and we are going to have a little fireside chat about Social Security. But before we do that, I wanted to give you a little bit of background about myself, because I don't think I've shared that on this podcast just yet. So I'm originally from Johnstown, Pennsylvania, which is about an hour and a half outside of Pittsburgh. And I moved here to Pittsburgh to go to college. I went to Pitt for biology, actually, with a double minor in chemistry and theater. And clearly my career has not panned out the way that my 21-year-old self thought, but that is okay. Through a series of fortunate events, I ended up in the wealth management space, and that led me to YTS, where I've been for almost a year. And I've been enjoying the journey ever since, and I'm looking forward to the continued growth of the financial planning department and just what is to come for the future. So I am a CFP professional, and one of the major components of the CFP classes is Social Security, because that is something that pretty much every single American is going to want to take into account when they're planning for retirement or for disability or for their death. So I really think it's important to kind of break down what is Social Security, who pays into it, why do we pay into it, when can I get my benefits, what happens if I pass away, what happens if I get divorced. So I'm going to go through a lot of these kind of nuances that come along with Social Security. It can be a little bit convoluted, but I hope that this gives us a nice high-level overview of what Social Security is. So let's get into it. Social Security, by definition, or another name for it, is the Old Age Survivors and Disability Insurance Program. So that's OASDI. So sometimes you may see that acronym. I'm going to refer to it as Social Security, as I think most people are more familiar with that term. But sometimes on your pay stub, you might see OASDI come out of your paychecks. Sometimes it's called FICA, and I'll get into what all of that means. But in general, Social Security is a federal safety net that benefits the elderly, the unemployed, and disadvantaged Americans. I just want to give a little bit of history about Social Security. And Jordan, this is where I'd want the graphic to kind of go on top of me speaking. Social Security was created as a social insurance, social security program as a product of the Great Depression. It's created by FDR. He proposed a program where people could contribute to their own economic future by contributing a portion of their paychecks into and their earned income into kind of a holding account until retirement. Up to that point, most retirement benefits came in the form of employer pensions, where employees didn't have much control over what happened to their retirement. But of course, the Great Depression kind of turned the economy on its head. And so employers and, again, the government kind of wanted a plan and a program where people could save towards something for their own economic benefit. So if we look to this timeline, in 1935, this is when FDR first signed Social Security into law, and people started paying into Social Security. By 1940, the very first monthly Social Security check was issued to Ida Mae Fuller, and she actually lived to be over 100 years old and actually received more in benefits than what she paid into the system. So that's pretty cool. And that's a trend we continue to see in today's world, where life expectancy has improved because of modern medicine, and I'm going to get into that a little bit more. In 1956, President Eisenhower signed into law disability benefits as part of the Social Security Administration. In 1965, President Johnson signed Medicare into law, which is a huge component of people's retirement health care plan. And then in 1982, something interesting happened. We have, on this timeline, it's listed as the Greenspan Commission. So the Greenspan Commission was formed by Alan Greenspan. And what was going to happen in 1983 is that the Social Security Trust Fund, or the reserves, were set to deplete at that point. And so they knew that we needed to take some kind of massive action to avoid people not having the Social Security benefits that they were used to receiving. So they did some drastic measures to hopefully improve the situation that was happening with the Social Security reserves. One of those things that they did is that they raised the full retirement age from age 65 to age 67, and it still stands that way today. They increased payroll taxes. Now, new federal employees were covered, where previously, if you worked for the federal government, you were in a system called the Civil Service Retirement System, and you were not paying into Social Security. So with the Greenspan Commission, they said, hey, let's have federal employees start paying into the system. So they created the Federal Employee Retirement System. That's the new federal pension system. And now federal employees are paying into Social Security. And then cost of living adjustments on Social Security were modified depending on how much was in the trust. So if there was more money in the trust, the cost of living would be higher. If the balance of the trust was a little bit on the low side, then the cost of living adjustment in that year would be a little bit less. The bottom line of this graphic is that there is constant updating to these laws as the landscape of the program changes and as the economy changes. One other thing I want to point out a little bit later in the timeline is in 2034, we're set to have the same thing happen as what happened in 1982, where the trust fund or the reserves are set to deplete. So I think we might be able to, and I can't say with certainty, but I have a feeling we will see another massive change or modification to either our payroll taxes, the cost of living adjustment, or some other measure. Maybe we increase full retirement age even higher, but something may need to change to keep the reserve from running out of money. One of the reasons, as I mentioned earlier, that the reserves are running out of money is because people are living longer. So the chances that the amount of money that you've put into the system versus the money that you're taking out of the system, those two numbers may have a discrepancy where you're receiving more in benefits than you've paid into the system because you're living longer. The other piece of that is the Social Security reserves are only allowed to be invested in U.S. Treasuries. And historically, those growth rates or the kind of rate at which the account is continuing to increase over time does not necessarily keep up with the markets. The Treasury returns are somewhere, I think, around 2 to 4%. Don't quote me on that, but the S&P has averaged over 10%. Over the last 10 or so years. So there's a discrepancy there with how much the account is growing or the fund is growing by each year because they have that limitation of how much or where the money can be invested that's being held within those reserves. Let's get into more of the nitty-gritty of how Social Security is funded. So there's an episode of Friends where Rachel starts a job and she gets her first paycheck, and it was a physical paycheck that she had to go deposit at the bank, and she's opening it up and she's looking at all of the deductions that are being taken out of her account, and she says, who is FICA and why are they getting all my money? And that is where Social Security and Medicare comes into play. FICA stands for Federal Insurance Contributions Act, but most people know it as FICA. It's also called your payroll taxes. So with each one of your paychecks, you are putting money into the Social Security Trust for your own future and everybody else's future. So how does this work? So as I'm sure you've noticed, if you've ever looked at one of your pay stubs, a pretty high percentage of your account or your paycheck is going to your payroll taxes. That's because 15.3% of each paycheck goes to FICA. Now, you, as the employee, do not pay all 15.3% of that. You pay half if you are a W-2 employee, and your employer matches the other half. So in total, you pay 12.4% for your payroll taxes, plus an additional 1.45% for Medicare taxes. Then your employer contributes that extra 6.2, 1.45 to equal 15.3%. If you're self-employed and you're a 1099 employee, you get the pleasure of paying both halves of that. So in that case, you would be subject to paying all 15.3% of that. Now, there's a little caveat with your payroll taxes. Payroll taxes are paid on dollars up to what's called the Social Security wage base. So for 2024, that dollar amount is $168,600. So if you make less than that dollar amount, every single one of those dollars will be taxed at that 12.4% in total, which is, again, you pay that 6.2% and your employer pays 6.2% of that. If you make over $168,600 for 2024, now only up to that Social Security wage base will be taxed for your payroll taxes. So if you make $170,000, only the first $168,600 will be taxed for payroll purposes, FICA purposes. Medicare taxes, on the other hand, you pay on every dollar that you earn. So if you earn above the Social Security wage base, you will pay on every dollar that you earn. So you'll pay 1.45% for you as the employee. Your employer pays an extra 1.45% to get you to 2.9%, again, contributing to overall 15.3%. Again, if you're self-employed, and I think I already said this, you'll pay both halves of that Medicare tax as well. Part of the Affordable Care Act is that if you make above $200,000 if you're single, or $250,000 if you're married, you will also be subject to an extra 0.9% additional Medicare tax. Now, you only as the employee pay this. So your employer does not match this. It's only on your payments to Medicare that if you make over $200,000 if you're single, $250,000 if you're married, that you will pay that extra 0.9%. So if you are employed, W-2 employee, you'll pay 2.35% in Medicare taxes, which is that 1.45% plus the 0.9% additional Medicare tax. And then if you're self-employed, you will pay your 2.9% for total Medicare contributions. And then you'll pay that additional 0.9% for yourself as the employee. So in total, 3.8% for Medicare. Big question is, given that, how do you qualify for benefits? So with every paycheck, as I said, you are qualifying toward your eligibility for benefits by paying your FICA and your Medicare taxes. In 2024, you earn one Social Security and Medicare credit for every $1,730 that you earn. And you can earn up to 4 credits per year. If you earn, let's say, for example, you are cleaning up Times Square on January 1. If you earn $6,920 in this year on January 1, cleaning up Times Square, you have earned all 4 of your credits for that year. You're considered fully insured by Social Security, meaning you'd be eligible for benefits when you achieve 40 credits. So that's 10 years of paying into the system if you've earned 4 credits per year. The number of credits that you have does not affect your dollar amount of benefit that you will receive if we're talking retirement benefits. That does not affect your dollar amount that you will receive. It purely makes you eligible to receive those benefits. What matters is how much you have earned. Social Security takes into account the highest 35 years of your earning history to determine how much of a benefit you will receive at retirement. So all that being said, when you have your 40 credits, what does that get you? Who qualifies? Who's eligible to receive benefits? One of the biggest components, and I think one of the most likely things you think about when you think about Social Security, is your retirement benefits. So when we're thinking about OASDI, the old age component of this is what I'm referencing now. The retirement piece of Social Security is the largest expenditure of the federal government. In 2023, they spent $1.3 trillion on Social Security. So that's a huge, huge consideration. And I think one of the reasons why the government really keeps a close eye on this, it's because there's so much paid out in benefits that it would almost be political suicide, as one of my colleagues says, for those benefits to disappear completely. If the trust fund runs out, they're going to have to do some change in legislation to keep those benefits going because, again, this is one of the largest expenditures in the federal budget every year. Roughly 9 out of 10 people who's over 65 in America has Social Security benefits that they're receiving. You can elect Social Security between age 62 and age 70. You cannot elect any younger than 62. Even if you retire early. So if you retire at 57, that does not qualify you to start Social Security benefits at 57. You have to wait until at least 62. For every year that you delay your benefits, there is a guaranteed 8% growth on those benefits. So let's say, for example, you retire at 62, but you say, you know what? I'm going to live out of a van. I'm not going to have much in terms of expenses. I don't need to turn on my Social Security right now. If you delay your benefit until, let's say, age 65, age 66, in the time from retirement until the time that you elect your benefits, you are getting a guaranteed 8% growth rate on that benefit. We can't say guaranteed a lot in our industry, but that is one of the things that is guaranteed 8%. Now, if you wait to take your benefit until age 70, that 8% growth rate stops. So there's no incentive to waiting to take your benefit at age 70, even if you are working. And I'm going to get into that in just a minute. But all in all, if you don't need the money, you still want to take your benefit at age 70 and not wait even longer than that, because now you've lost that 8% growth rate. Whereas before age 70, we still have that 8% growth. At age 70, that stops. And the Social Security Administration will only give you back pay for 6 months from the time you started your benefit. So if you started your benefit at age 70 and 7 months, they will only back pay you for 6 months. So there's no, again, advantage to stopping or not taking your benefit once you reach age 70. If you file for Social Security, I'm back to age 62 again. If you file for Social Security at 62, there is a reduction in your full retirement age amount. So 67 is, again, the full retirement age as it stands today, and there's a reduction in your benefit of about 25% from 67 to 62. So if you start your benefit at 62, you have a permanent reduction in your full retirement age benefit, and it never will go back up. It'll increase once you start Social Security. You won't get a guaranteed 8% growth on the account. Now you'll be subject to those cost of living adjustments that I was mentioning earlier, where those will fluctuate with how much is in the trust. So 1 year it could be 1%, 1 year it could be no percent. Some years it could be 2%. It just depends. But you will hopefully see your benefit increase over time. Now, will it keep up with inflation? I don't know. But just something to keep in mind. Let's say you are age 62 and you are still working, and you come to me and you say, hey, Steph, I want to keep working, but what if I take my Social Security now? You will be penalized for taking Social Security and still working. So if you're still working and you're age 62 and you decide, I want to start my benefit, you will be penalized. It's $1 reduction in benefits for every $2 over what is called the earnings limit, income threshold, which for this year is $22,320. So if your benefit is basically cut in half if you continue to work and you elect Social Security. Now, that penalty goes away once you reach full retirement age. In the year you reach full retirement age, the reduction is reduced. So instead of it being a $1 reduction for every $2 of income that you make above that $22,000, now you have a $1 for every $3 over the limit. So the reduction goes down a little bit, and then it completely goes away after you get to full retirement age. So you could theoretically continue working until age 67, and then take your benefit without a reduction and keep working. So there's incentives to waiting, and there's also incentives to keep working, because the longer that you work, the more that you're also paying into the Social Security system. So there's a chance that from 62 to 67, those could be one of your high 35 years of earning. So you want to take advantage of that, and you don't want to turn on your benefit at that point because you want to let that benefit keep growing if it's going to be one of your highest 35 years of earning. So that's the gist of retirement benefits. So let's switch a little bit and let's talk about what happens for spouses. So if both spouses are working and earning roughly comparative salaries, there's a really good chance that their Social Security benefits will be roughly the same. If you have a large income disparity between spouses, let's say one spouse worked, the other stayed home and took care of the kids, there's a chance that the spouse who stayed home may not have paid into the Social Security system at all, or perhaps worked part-time and paid into it a little bit, but their benefit is much lower than the spouse who was working full-time for those high 35 years. What Social Security has done for those spouses is they have allowed the spouse with the lower benefit to potentially bump up to roughly half of the spouse who was the higher earner. So let's say, for example, we have a husband and a wife. The husband's full retirement age benefit at age 67 is going to be $2,000 a month for easy math. The wife stayed home and took care of the kids. She paid into the system a little bit. She worked part-time here and there, but didn't work full-time. Her benefit is only $500 a month when she reaches full retirement age. When the husband collects his Social Security benefit, if he elects at age 67, if she is older than 62, she will be able to collect some percentage of his benefit. Somewhere again between 32.5% and half of the benefit. We'll use half for easy math. So in that case, she would have her benefit go from $500 up to $1,000 to get her to half of his benefit, which is of course the $2,000 a month. So there is a kind of safety net there for if you have a husband and a wife or two spouses that have an income disparity where they kind of have you covered. So that was old age. Let's talk about survivors. So old age survivors, disability insurance. So survivors. If you are married and your spouse passes away, if you are age 60 or older and were married for at least 9 months before your spouse's death and you didn't remarry before age 60, it's a little convoluted, you will be eligible for survivor benefits. And the benefits, the percentage of those benefits goes up over time. It starts at the lowest point from 75% at age 61. It's 80% at age 63. It's 90% at age 65. And it's 100% at full retirement age. This also accounts for ex-spouses. So ex-spouses and spouses have the same treatment in terms of what makes them eligible to receive survivor benefits should their spouse pass away. So again, that's age 60 or older. Or it's ex-spouses who were married for at least 10 years may also qualify. Then there's also survivor benefits for children. Children who are age 17 and younger, or if you're 18 or 19 and you're still in K through 12 full-time, or if you are any age and you're disabled before you're 21, you are also eligible to receive survivor benefits. And also if you have dependent parents that you are caring for. So if I pass away and my mom was living with me, my mom may be eligible for survivor benefits because I was kind of taking care of her. There's some rules there, and you can also, back to spouses, you also can be any age and collect survivor benefits if you're caring for a dependent child. So again, that's a child that's under 17. I think it's either 15, 17, somewhere in that range, that SSA considers that a dependent child. So you might be eligible to receive benefits a little bit earlier than age 60. The last thing to mention here is disability insurance. So again, OASDI, DI. Disability insurance provides monthly payments to those who are disabled that stop or limit their ability to go back to work. You're eligible if you meet Social Security's definition of disability, which is pretty strict, but there are some conditions that automatically qualify you for disability benefits, blindness being one of them. There's, I think, liver or maybe lung transplants, something about organ transplants is one of them. And there's a bunch of other ones that also automatically qualify you for that. But you have to meet their definition of disability, and you have to have a doctor that signs off that says, yes, this person has this condition, and then you can take that to Social Security and start collecting disability benefits. In addition to meeting the definition of disability, you also have to have enough working history. So you have to have worked for the last 5 to 10 years, depending on how old you are. Might be more like 10, but if you're younger than 24, you might need less working history to be able to qualify for those benefits. And benefits also have a 5-month waiting period. So from the time you get disabled and get approved, all of that good stuff, to the time that benefits actually start to get paid out, that's a 5-month waiting period. So you may need another source of income in that time. That's where disability insurance may come into play. A lot of employers offer disability insurance through their group plan, but you can always come see us too for disability insurance needs if that's something that's of interest to you. And your disability must be expected to last longer than a year. I don't think I said that before, but your disability has to last longer than a year or result in death. Are benefits taxed? So that's another piece of this, is when I'm thinking about somebody's financial plan, is I want to take into account their tax situation. And one of the considerations is Social Security benefits taxed? I don't know. It depends. It depends on your tax filing status, and it depends on how much you make. If you're single, head of household, or a qualifying widow or widower, 0% of your benefit will be taxed if your total household income is less than $25,000. If you're married filing jointly, same rules, but it's $32,000 a year instead of $25,000. Up to 50% of your benefit will be taxed if your total household income, if you're single, head of household, or a qualifying widow or widower, 50% of that benefit will be taxed if total household income falls between $25,000 and $34,000. If you're married filing jointly, it's $32,000 to $44,000. And then up to 85% of your benefit will be taxed if your household income is greater than $34,000. Again, if you're single, head of household, qualifying widower. And then for married filing jointly, that income threshold for 85% of the benefit to be taxable is $44,000. And this applies for all types of Social Security benefits: retirement, survivor, disability. Income, for purposes of what qualifies as income, is pensions, it's your wages, including distributions from an IRA, interest, dividends, capital gains. This was a lot of information to take in, and if you have any questions on this, or if I didn't cover something that is of interest to you in the Social Security world, certainly give us a call. You can find us at 4000 Triangle Lane, Suite 200, right here in Murraysville. Call us at 724-733-4334. Follow us on all social media platforms. It's Watch Your Assets, and we will see you on the next one. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA/SIPC.